The initial shock, the triplets screamed, not a normal cry. A desperate, heart-wrenching scream that made every single person in that Dallas mansion freeze in place. And they screamed for her. Natalie Morrison stood at the entrance of the nursery, her worn-out shoes barely crossing the threshold of that room that cost more than everything she'd ever owned in her 28 years of life. Her hands trembled. Her face went completely pale. Those 3 babies, 18 months old, with their chubby little arms extended toward her, crying as if their souls were being ripped apart. "What did you do to my children?" Vivian Blackwood's voice cut through the air like a whip. Sharp, venomous, full of an anger that seemed too intense for the situation. I didn't do anything, ma'am. I just walked in, I swear." Natalie's voice came out as a whisper, her throat tight with fear. But the babies wouldn't stop. Ethan, Noah, and Emma. 3 perfect little beings, dressed in clothes that cost more than Natalie's monthly rent, crying desperately while reaching their tiny hands toward a woman they supposedly had never seen before in their lives. This moment, right here, was about to destroy everything. But what nobody knew yet was that those babies were recognizing something, or someone. Let's go back 3 weeks. Because to understand what's happening in this mansion, you need to know how Natalie Morrison ended up here. 3 weeks earlier, Natalie was standing in line at a soup kitchen in East Dallas, holding a newspaper with job ads she'd circled in red pen. Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten a proper meal in 2 days. The apartment she'd been renting, a tiny studio in a dangerous neighborhood, was gone. Evicted. Her belongings in 2 garbage bags she kept hidden behind a dumpster. "You looking for work, honey?" an older woman in line had asked her, noticing the newspaper. "Yes, ma'am. Anything. I can clean, I can cook, I can take care of kids," Natalie had responded, trying to smile even though her eyes were dead inside. The woman had written down an address on a napkin. "The Blackwood Mansion. They're looking for a housekeeper. It's hard work, and Mrs. Blackwood is, well, she's difficult, but it pays." Natalie had clutched that napkin like it was a winning lottery ticket. The Blackwood Mansion sat in Highland Park, the richest neighborhood in Dallas. When Natalie arrived for her interview, she had to take 3 buses and walk 2 miles because she couldn't afford the last connection. She arrived sweating, her only decent dress wrinkled, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. The mansion was obscene. That's the only word for it. White columns, perfectly manicured gardens, a fountain in the driveway that was bigger than the room Natalie used to rent. She felt like she was going to be sick. A stern-faced woman in a black uniform opened the door. "You're late." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Blackwood doesn't tolerate excuses. Come in, wipe your feet." Natalie was led through hallways with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and paintings that looked like they belonged in museums. She tried not to touch anything, afraid her mere presence would somehow damage something worth more than her entire existence. Vivian Blackwood was waiting in the sitting room. Blonde, perfectly styled hair, a white pantsuit that screamed money, jewelry that could feed a family for a year. She looked at Natalie the way someone looks at something stuck to the bottom of their shoe. "So, you're the one." Vivian didn't even gesture for Natalie to sit down. "The agency said you have experience?" "Yes, Mom. I've worked in housekeeping for 5 years. I've taken care of children. I can cook. I don't need your life story." Vivian cut her off, examining her manicured nails. "I need someone who knows their place, someone who doesn't ask questions, someone who does what they're told without complaints. Can you do that?" The humiliation burned in Natalie's chest, but she needed this job. She needed it so badly she could taste the desperation in her mouth. "Yes, Mom. The pay is $1,500 a month. You'll work 6 days a week from 6 in the morning until 8 at night. You'll have Sundays off. You'll eat after the family eats. You'll use the staff bathroom. You will not speak to Mr. Blackwood unless he speaks to you first. You will not enter the children's rooms unless specifically instructed. Are we clear? 1,500 a month for those hours was borderline exploitation. Natalie knew it. Vivian knew it. But Natalie was sleeping behind a dumpster. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. You start tomorrow, 6 a.m. sharp. If you're even 1 minute late, don't bother coming at all. That night, Natalie slept on a bench at the bus station, clutching her 2 garbage bags, trying to ignore the cold and the fear. But she had a job. She had a chance. She had no idea what she was walking into. The first 2 weeks were hell. Vivian Blackwood seemed to take personal pleasure in making Natalie's life miserable, scrub the floors on your hands and knees, even though there were mops, polish the silver, even though it was already spotless. Redo the bed 3 times because the corners weren't perfect enough. The other staff members, an older cook named Margaret and a gardener named Jose, tried to warn her quietly. "She's testing you," Margaret whispered one day while Natalie was washing dishes with tears streaming down her face. "She does this to everyone. She wants you to quit." "I can't quit," Natalie whispered back. "I have nowhere else to go." Margaret patted her shoulder with wet hands. "Then keep your head down and survive it, honey." But it was Richard Blackwood who confused Natalie the most. The man of the house, 45 years old, tall, distinguished-looking, with grey at his temples. He ran a real estate empire worth hundreds of millions, and he barely seemed to notice his own wife's cruelty. The few times he'd seen Natalie, he'd nodded politely. Once he'd even said good morning to her. Vivian had exploded at him later that evening. Natalie heard it through the walls. "Don't talk to the help, Richard. It makes them think they're equal to us." Natalie had never seen the Triplets. She'd heard them, of course. Babies cry. But Vivian had made it crystal clear that the children's wing was off limits. There was a nanny, a young woman named Claire, who seemed terrified of Vivian, who took care of them. Until today. Week 3. When Claire called in sick, and Vivian, furious about some charity luncheon she couldn't miss, had barked at Natalie. "You'll watch the children until I get back. Don't touch anything expensive. Don't let them make a mess. Just keep them alive for 3 hours. Can you manage that, or is that too complicated for you?" And that's how Natalie ended up standing at the nursery door. That's how those 3 babies, Ethan, Noah, and Emma, saw her face for the first time since the day they were born. The crying got worse. Emma, the little girl, was sobbing so hard she started to choke. Natalie's body moved on instinct. She rushed forward, picked up the baby, held her against her chest. Emma stopped crying immediately. Just like that, like a switch had been flipped. Then she wrapped her tiny arms around Natalie's neck and held on like she would never let go. Natalie's heart shattered into 1,000,000 pieces, because she knew that grip. She knew the weight of that little body. She knew the smell of that baby's hair. "No," Natalie whispered, tears streaming down her face. "No, no, no." But Ethan and Noah were reaching for her too, crying, demanding, and when she somehow managed to hold all 3 of them, all 3 babies calmed down. They pressed their faces against her. They grabbed her hair. They made little sounds of contentment. And Natalie Morrison knew, with absolute certainty, that she was holding her own children. The babies she'd given away 2 years ago for $50,000 because she was desperate and broken and told they would have a better life. What would you do if you were her? Tell me in the comments which city you're watching from, because you need to hear the rest of this story. Because when Vivian Blackwood came home early and found Natalie sitting on the floor with all 3 babies asleep in her arms, her face went white as a sheet. "Get out of this room now." Natalie carefully laid the babies in their cribs. They immediately started crying again, reaching for her, calling for her with sounds that weren't quite words yet but were close, so close. "Ma, ma, ma." And Vivian Blackwood's hands started shaking because she knew. Oh, she knew exactly what was happening, and the secret she'd been hiding for 2 years was about to explode in her face. Secrets of the past, 2 years ago. Let me take you back, because you need to understand what led to this moment. Natalie Morrison was 26 years old, 7 months pregnant, and completely alone. Not just pregnant, pregnant with triplets. 3 babies growing inside her body, 3 heartbeats the doctor had shown her on the ultrasound screen, while her own heart was breaking. Miss Morrison, do you have support at home, family, a partner? The doctor had asked gently, looking at Natalie's thin face, her tired eyes, the cheap clothes that didn't fit her growing belly. No, Natalie had whispered. No, I don't. The father, a man named Derek, who she'd thought loved her, who'd promised her the world, had disappeared the moment the word triplets came out of the doctor's mouth. Packed his bags while she was still at the clinic. Changed his number. Gone. Like he'd never existed. Natalie was working 3 jobs at the time: waitress at a diner during breakfast shift, cleaning office buildings at night, weekend shifts at a grocery store. She was exhausted all the time, her feet swollen, her back aching, trying to save every single penny for the babies coming. But it wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. The math was simple and brutal. 3 babies meant 3 times everything. 3 car seats, 3 cribs, 3 of every single thing. Diapers, formula, clothes. And Natalie couldn't even afford to feed herself properly. She'd applied for assistance. Medicaid covered the pregnancy, thank God, but after the babies were born, she'd been on waiting lists for affordable housing for 8 months. Childcare costs would eat up more than she made. Her tiny studio apartment didn't allow children. Natalie would lie awake at night, feeling those 3 babies moving inside her, kicking, alive, depending on her. And she would cry until she couldn't breathe. "I'm so sorry," she would whisper to her belly. "I'm so sorry I can't give you what you deserve." She was 8 months pregnant when she got the eviction notice. The landlord had found out about the pregnancy, wrote her up for violating the lease, gave her 30 days. Natalie was sitting on a bench outside the clinic, holding that eviction notice with shaking hands, trying not to have a complete breakdown in public, when the woman approached her. Well-dressed, expensive purse, kind eyes, or at least that's what Natalie thought at the time. "Excuse me, dear, I couldn't help but notice. Are you all right?" Natalie wiped her eyes quickly. "I'm fine, thank you." "You don't look fine, sweetheart. How far along are you?" "8 months. Triplets." The words came out automatically. Natalie was too tired to lie. The woman's eyes lit up. "Triplets? Oh my, that's quite a blessing." "Yeah, a blessing." Natalie's voice was hollow. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't pry. My name is Catherine." The woman sat down next to her. "I work with an organization that helps young mothers in difficult situations." Natalie should have known right then, should have felt that something was wrong. But she was so tired, so desperate, so completely out of options. "What kind of organization?" "We connect expecting mothers with families who can provide for children, loving homes, financial security, everything a child needs to thrive." Catherine's voice was smooth, practiced. "It's called private adoption. Very discreet, very respectful." Natalie's stomach turned. "You mean give up my babies?" "I mean give them a chance at life that you, through no fault of your own, cannot currently provide." Catherine pulled out a card. "Just think about it. Here's my number. We compensate birth mothers fairly for their time and medical expenses. It could help you get back on your feet." "How much?" The words came out before Natalie could stop them. She hated herself for asking. "For triplets, healthy triplets, $50,000. The number hit Natalie like a physical blow. $50,000. She could get an apartment. She could get her life together. She could survive. But her babies. "Think about it," Catherine said softly, standing up. "Sometimes the most loving thing a mother can do is give her children the life she cannot." Natalie took the card. She told herself she wouldn't call. She told herself she'd find another way. But 3 days later, she was sleeping in her car, and the babies were coming any day now, and she called the number. The meeting happened in a lawyer's office. Clean, professional, intimidating. Catherine was there, along with a man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as Mr. Harper, attorney at law. "Let me be very clear about the terms," Mr. Harper said, sliding papers across the desk. "You will receive $50,000, $25,000 upon signing this agreement, $25,000 after you deliver the babies and complete the legal surrender of parental rights." Who are the adoptive parents? Natalie's voice was barely a whisper. "A wealthy couple who cannot have children of their own. They will provide the triplets with the absolute best of everything: private schools, health care, a stable, loving home. You would be giving them an incredible gift." Natalie's hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the pen. Can I meet them?" "No. This is a closed adoption. That's the standard for this type of arrangement. It's better for everyone involved. Clean break. The children grow up in their new family without confusion." "But Miss Morrison," Mr. Harper's voice was firm, "you have no home, no resources, no support system. You're about to give birth to 3 babies. What exactly is your alternative plan here?" Natalie didn't have one. That was the problem. She had nothing. She signed the papers with tears running down her face, her hand barely able to write her own name. "You're doing the right thing," Catherine said, patting her shoulder. "You're giving them a chance." The check for $25,000 felt like blood money in Natalie's hands. 1 week later, Natalie went into labor, 36 weeks. The babies were coming. The hospital was chaos, 3 babies being born. Emergency C-section because baby B was breech. Natalie was terrified, in pain, alone on that operating table while doctors shouted medical terms she didn't understand. And then she heard them. 3 different cries, 3 perfect, beautiful cries. 2 boys and a girl, the nurse said. "All healthy, all breathing on their own. You did it, Mama." They let her hold them. Just once. For 20 minutes while they cleaned them up, weighed them, checked them. Ethan, 6 pounds, 2 ounces, born first. He had a tiny birthmark on his left shoulder, shaped like a crescent moon. Noah, 5 pounds, 8 ounces, born second. He had the smallest hands Natalie had ever seen. Emma, 5 pounds, 6 ounces, born last. She had a full head of dark hair and eyes that looked right into Natalie's soul. "I love you," Natalie whispered to them, tears streaming down her face. "I love you so much. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." And then Catherine walked into the room with nurses, with papers, with that same kind smile that now looked like a monster's grin. "It's time, Natalie. The adoptive family is waiting." They took the babies, all 3 of them, out of Natalie's arms while she sobbed so hard she thought she would die. She wanted to die. She wanted to scream, to fight, to grab her babies back. But she'd signed the papers. She'd taken the money. She'd agreed. The second check for $25,000 was handed to her the next day, along with discharge papers. Natalie Morrison left that hospital with empty arms, a scarred belly, and $50,000 that felt like the cost of her soul. She tried to move on. She really did. Got a small apartment, tried to work, but every single day, every single moment, she thought about those 3 babies, wondered where they were, if they were happy, if they were loved, if they ever thought about her. And now, 2 years later, standing in this mansion, Natalie finally knew the truth. That wealthy couple was Richard and Vivian Blackwood. Those 3 perfect babies were Ethan, Noah, and Emma. Her babies. The ones she gave away because she thought she was giving them a better life. But what Natalie didn't know yet was that Vivian Blackwood had lied about everything. Richard Blackwood had no idea those babies weren't biologically his. He thought Vivian had been pregnant. He thought those were their biological children. Vivian had worn a fake pregnancy belly for 9 months, had faked doctor's appointments, had disappeared for a baby moon right before the babies were supposedly due. And then she'd come back with 3 newborns, telling everyone she'd given birth at a private hospital in Switzerland. The entire thing was a lie, a massive, elaborate lie. And now Natalie was living in her house, taking care of her own children without knowing it was allowed, watching Vivian play mother to babies that weren't hers. That night, after Vivian had screamed at her, after the babies had finally exhausted themselves crying, Natalie went to her tiny room in the staff quarters and broke down. She pulled up her shirt and looked at the C-section scar across her lower abdomen. The proof, the evidence carved into her own flesh. Those were her babies. She knew it in every cell of her body. But what could she do? She'd signed away her rights. She'd taken the money. She had no proof, no power, nothing. If you're feeling angry right now, it's because you have a heart. What would you do in her place? Because this story is about to get so much worse before it gets better. Vivian Blackwood was scared, and scared people do dangerous things. The question was, how far would she go to keep her secret buried? Humiliation and cruelty. The next morning, Vivian was waiting for Natalie in the kitchen at 5:30 a.m., half an hour before her shift even started. "We need to talk." Vivian's voice was ice cold. Natalie's heart was pounding. She'd barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those 3 babies reaching for her, crying for her. "Yes, Mom? I saw the way you looked at my children yesterday. I saw the way you held them." Vivian stepped closer, her perfume overwhelming, expensive. "Let me make something very clear to you. Those are my children, mine and Richard's. You are the help. You don't touch them. You don't look at them. You don't think about them. Do you understand me?" The cruelty in her voice made Natalie's skin crawl. But she couldn't fight back. Not yet. She needed proof. She needed time. "Yes, Ma'am. I'm sorry if I overstepped." Sorry doesn't cut it. Vivian's eyes were sharp, calculating. "Claire will be back today. You will never be alone with those babies again. In fact, I think we need to review your duties." That's when the real torture began. Vivian started finding fault in everything. The floors weren't clean enough? Scrub them again, on your hands and knees, with a toothbrush. Yes, a toothbrush, the entire foyer. Natalie spent 4 hours on her knees that day, scrubbing marble floors with a toothbrush while Vivian watched, sipping her coffee, making phone calls, occasionally dropping crumbs just to make Natalie start over in that spot. "You missed a spot there. No, there. Are you blind? Start over." Margaret, the cook, whispered to Natalie when Vivian finally left. "She's trying to break you. I've seen her do this before." "Has anyone ever survived it?" Natalie asked, her knees bleeding through her pants. "One girl. Lasted 6 months. Left crying." Margaret shook her head. "Why don't you just quit, honey? This isn't worth it." But Natalie couldn't quit. Those babies upstairs were hers, her flesh and blood. She'd already abandoned them once. She wouldn't do it again, even if it killed her. The humiliation got worse. Vivian started calling Natalie into rooms just to insult her in front of the other staff. "Look at how she walks, like she owns the place. You work for me. You're nothing. Do you understand? Nothing." She made Natalie redo the silverware 3 times during a dinner party preparation because one fork had a microscopic water spot. She accidentally spilled an entire pot of coffee on the kitchen floor and made Natalie clean it up while it was still hot, burning her hands. "Clumsy girl. Look what you made me do." But the worst part? Natalie could hear the babies crying upstairs every day, crying and crying. And Claire, the nanny, looked increasingly exhausted and stressed. One afternoon, Natalie was cleaning the hallway near the nursery when she heard Claire on the phone, whispering urgently, I don't know what's wrong with them. They won't stop crying. Nothing works anymore. Mrs. Blackwood is going to fire me. I know it." The babies were crying for Natalie. They remembered her. On some deep, primal level, they knew. And it was breaking Natalie's heart every single second. 2 weeks after the incident in the nursery, Richard Blackwood announced they were hosting a business dinner. 12 people. Important investors. Vivian was in a panic, screaming at everyone, making sure everything was absolutely perfect. This dinner determines whether Richard closes a $50 million deal. Everything must be flawless, flawless. "Do you hear me?" The day of the dinner, Vivian called Natalie into her bedroom. "You'll be serving tonight." Natalie blinked. "But Mom, I'm not trained to—" "I don't care. The catering staff cancelled last minute. You'll wear this." Vivian threw a black dress and white apron at her. "You'll serve the food. You'll pour the wine. You'll keep your mouth shut, and you'll do it barefoot." Barefoot? Did I stutter? These people are important. I won't have you clomping around in cheap shoes embarrassing me, barefoot. And if you mess this up, you're fired immediately. Natalie wanted to refuse, wanted to walk out right then. But she thought of those babies upstairs, thought of Emma's tiny hands reaching for her. She put on the dress. She took off her shoes. The dinner was a nightmare. 12 wealthy people sitting around a table that cost more than a car, talking about investments and properties and money, while Natalie served them like she was invisible. Her feet hurt on the cold marble floors. The plates were heavy. Her hands shook. And Vivian watched her like a hawk, waiting for her to make a mistake. It happened during the main course. Natalie was pouring wine for one of the investors, a large man in an expensive suit who kept moving his glass around, making it difficult. She was concentrating so hard on not spilling that she didn't notice Vivian's foot sliding out into the aisle. Natalie tripped. The wine bottle flew out of her hands. Red wine splashed across the white tablecloth, across the investor's jacket, across Vivian's dress. The table went silent. "You stupid, clumsy girl!" Vivian shot to her feet, wine dripping from her designer dress. "Look what you've done. Do you have any idea how much this dress costs, do you?" "I'm so sorry, ma'am. Sorry? Sorry?" Vivian's voice got louder, performing for the guests now. "This is exactly why you can't trust these people. Give them a job and they can't even perform simple tasks without destroying everything." Natalie saw it then. The wine bottle was nowhere near where she'd dropped it. It was at Vivian's feet. She'd grabbed it after Natalie fell and poured it herself to make the mess worse. She'd done this on purpose. "I'll call the police," Vivian announced to the table. "She's probably here illegally anyway. They all are." "Vivian." Richard's voice cut through the chaos, quiet but firm. "That's enough." Everyone looked at him. "It was an accident. Everyone, please calm down. Natalie, go get cleaned up. I'll handle this." Vivian's face went red with fury. "Richard, she ruined—" "I said I'll handle it." Richard's tone left no room for argument. He turned to the investors. "I apologize for the disruption. Let's continue our discussion." Natalie fled to the kitchen, wine-stained, barefoot, humiliated beyond words. Margaret was there, saw her face, and immediately wrapped her in a hug. "Oh, honey, oh no." "She did it on purpose," Natalie whispered. "She tripped me on purpose." "I know, I saw." That night, after the guests left, Natalie heard Richard and Vivian fighting in their bedroom. The walls were thick, but the anger was loud enough to carry. "You humiliated that girl in front of everyone." "She humiliated me. She's incompetent." "You tripped her, Vivian. I saw you do it. What the hell is wrong with you?" "Nothing is wrong with me. What's wrong is you defending the help over your own wife." The argument went on for an hour. Natalie lay in her small room, staring at the ceiling, wondering how much more she could take. But then, at midnight, she heard it. The crying. The babies were crying again, loud, desperate. and she could hear Claire in there, exhausted, begging them to please calm down. Natalie couldn't take it anymore. She crept out of her room, moved silently through the dark mansion, and stood outside the nursery door. She could hear Claire inside, crying herself now. Please, I don't know what you want. Please just sleep. Natalie knocked softly. The door opened. Claire's face was a mess, exhausted, desperate. Natalie, what are you? Let me try. Please, just for a few minutes. Claire looked like she might cry with relief. Mrs. Blackwood will kill us both. She's asleep. She'll never know. Please. Claire hesitated, then stepped aside. The moment Natalie walked into that nursery, all 3 babies turned toward her. Their crying stopped. Just like that. Emma stood up in her crib, holding onto the rails, her face wet with tears. Ma. Natalie's heart stopped. That wasn't babbling. That was a word. A real word. She went to the crib, picked up Emma, and the baby wrapped her arms around Natalie's neck so tight it hurt. Noah and Ethan were reaching through their crib rails, making desperate sounds. Natalie sat on the floor and gathered all 3 of them into her arms. They curled into her, their crying fading into little hiccups, then silence. Peace. For the first time in weeks, according to Claire's shocked face, they were calm. How did you? Claire whispered. I've been trying for 3 hours. Natalie couldn't answer. She was crying too hard because Emma was patting her face with tiny hands, because Noah had grabbed her hair and wasn't letting go, because Ethan was making a sound in his throat that was almost like he was trying to say something. Mama, Emma said again, clearer this time, and then Noah repeated it. Mama! And Ethan, not to be left out, tried his best. Ma, their first real words, and they were calling Natalie Mama. Claire backed away slowly, her hand over her mouth. Oh my God, Natalie, who are you? But Natalie didn't get to answer, because the nursery door opened, and Vivian Blackwood was standing there in her silk nightgown, her face twisted with an emotion Natalie couldn't quite read. Rage, fear, both. What did they just say? Behind Vivian in the hallway, Richard appeared. He'd heard it too. He was staring at the scene in front of him, at Natalie on the floor with 3 babies calling her mama, at his wife's white face. Vivian, Richard said slowly, why are the children calling the housekeeper mama? And Vivian's carefully constructed world began to crumble. If your heart is pounding right now, leave a like, because what happens next will shock you. The truth begins to emerge. Vivian's mouth opened and closed, like a fish out of water. No sound came out. Her perfect, controlled mask was cracking right there in the doorway. I asked you a question, Vivian. Richard's voice was deadly calm, the kind of calm that comes before a storm. Why are my children calling the housekeeper Mama? They're babies, Richard. They babble. It doesn't mean anything. Vivian's voice was too high, too fast. Natalie, put my children down, now. But the triplets clung to Natalie harder. Emma buried her face in Natalie's neck. Noah's little fist was tangled in her hair. Ethan was making distressed sounds, sensing the tension. They don't look like they're babbling. Richard stepped into the nursery, his eyes moving between the babies, Natalie's tear-stained face, and his wife's panicked expression. They look like they know her. That's ridiculous. She's been here 3 weeks. Then why won't they let her go? Richard moved closer. Claire, how long have they been like this? Claire, the nanny, looked terrified. She glanced between Vivian and Richard, clearly afraid of losing her job no matter what she said. Tell him. Natalie's voice came out stronger than she felt. Tell him what's been happening. Claire, you're fired if you say one word, Vivian hissed. Vivian! Richard's voice cracked like a whip. Stop talking. He turned back to Claire. You work for me too. Tell me the truth, now. Claire's hands were shaking. The babies, they've been crying non-stop for 2 weeks, ever since Natalie started working here. Nothing calms them down anymore. Nothing. But just now, the second she walked in, Claire's voice broke. They stopped, like magic, and they called her Mama. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard ran his hand through his hair, thinking. You could see his businessman brain working, putting pieces together. Vivian, my office, right now. Richard, this is absurd. Now! Vivian left the nursery, her back rigid, her hands clenched into fists. Richard followed her, but before he left, he turned to Natalie. Don't go anywhere. I'm not done here. Natalie sat on the nursery floor for another 20 minutes, holding the triplets while they finally fell asleep. Claire sat against the wall, staring at her. Who are you? Claire whispered. Really? I think... Natalie's voice cracked. I think I'm their mother. The words hung in the air. Saying them out loud made them real, terrifying and real. Claire's eyes went wide. But Mrs. Blackwood was pregnant. I saw the photos. Claire stopped. Oh my God, the Switzerland trip. She went to Switzerland right before they were born, came back with 3 newborns. We never saw her actually pregnant up close. She always wore loose clothes, kept saying she was on bed rest. She faked it. Natalie laid the sleeping babies gently in their cribs, one by one. Her hands were shaking. She bought them. She bought my babies. How do you know they're yours? Natalie lifted her shirt just enough to show the C-section scar. Because 2 years ago, I gave birth to triplets, 2 boys and a girl. And I gave them up for adoption because I was broke and desperate and told they'd have a better life. Tears streamed down her face. I didn't know who adopted them. It was closed, anonymous. But the moment I saw these 3 babies, the moment they cried for me, I knew. Emma has a birthmark on her right ankle. Ethan has one on his left shoulder. Noah's left ear is slightly smaller than his right. I know because I held them for 20 minutes after they were born, before they were taken away from me. Claire checked. The birthmarks were exactly where Natalie said they'd be. Oh my God! Claire sat down hard. Mr. Blackwood doesn't know, does he? He thinks they're his biological children. I don't think he knows anything. Downstairs, Richard and Vivian's argument shook the mansion. You're being paranoid, Vivian's voice carried up the stairs. She's just a maid who's good with children. Then explain the birthmarks. Richard's roar made both Natalie and Claire jump. I heard what that girl said. I checked the babies while you were following me. Everything she said was true. So either she's been studying our children like a stalker, or she knows things only a mother would know. Silence. Then Richard's voice, colder than ice. When exactly did you give birth to them, Vivian? Because I'm starting to remember that I never actually saw you in labor. You went to that private clinic in Switzerland. Alone. You said you wanted privacy, that it was better for recovery. You came back with 3 babies and adoption papers saying they were ours. They are ours. I carried them for 9 months. Then you won't mind if we do DNA tests. All of us. Right now. Tonight. More silence. You're being ridiculous, Richard. No. What's ridiculous is that I've been so busy building my empire that I never stopped to question why my wife of 3 years, who supposedly couldn't get pregnant, suddenly showed up pregnant with triplets. Why you refused to let me come to doctor's appointments. Why you were so secretive about everything. Richard's voice was getting louder. What did you do, Vivian? What did you do? Natalie heard something crash. Glass breaking. Then Vivian screaming. You want to know the truth? Fine, I bought them. I bought 3 babies from a desperate girl who couldn't afford to keep them. Because you wanted children and I couldn't give them to you. Because your precious family legacy needed heirs. Because you would have left me if I couldn't produce a child. The confession echoed through the entire house. Natalie couldn't breathe. She'd known it, suspected it. But hearing Vivian admit it out loud was like being hit by a truck. You bought children. Richard's voice was barely a whisper now, deadly. You committed fraud. You lied to me for 2 years. Those babies aren't mine biologically, are they? No. Does their biological mother know where they are? Pause. She's in this house, isn't she? Richard's voice rose again. The maid. Natalie. That's why the babies know her. That's why they call her Mama, because she is their mother. And you brought her here to work for us, not knowing who she was. I didn't know, Vivian screamed. How was I supposed to know? The adoption was anonymous. When she showed up for the interview, I didn't recognize her. It was 2 years ago. She looks different. I swear I didn't know. But you suspected. That's why you've been torturing her. That's why you've been trying to make her quit. Vivian didn't answer. Natalie's legs were shaking so hard she had to sit down. Claire grabbed her hand, squeezed it. Richard's footsteps came up the stairs, heavy, purposeful. He appeared in the nursery doorway. His face was grey. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the last hour. He stared at Natalie for a long moment. Is it true? Are you their biological mother? Natalie stood up, even though her knees were weak. She looked Richard Blackwood in the eye. Yes. Richard closed his eyes, took a deep breath, opened them again. Tell me everything, from the beginning, and don't leave anything out. So Natalie told him everything, the pregnancy, Derek abandoning her, the jobs, the eviction, Catherine approaching her, the $50,000, the lawyer's office, signing away her rights, giving birth, holding her babies for 20 minutes, watching them being taken away, the 2 years of grief and guilt and wondering, finding this job, not knowing, the moment she saw the babies and they cried for her, recognizing them, knowing with every fiber of her being that these were her children. Richard listened without interrupting. His face was unreadable. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. Do you have proof? Hospital records? The adoption papers? I have the C-section scar. I have the hospital discharge papers with the triplets' birth weights and times. They'll match your baby's documents. I have the cancelled checks from the adoption agency. I kept everything. Richard nodded slowly. I'm going to have my lawyers look into this. I'm going to get DNA tests done on all of us. He looked at the sleeping babies. If what you're saying is true, if Vivian really did buy these children illegally, this is going to get very complicated very fast. I don't want to take them from you, Natalie said quickly. I know they know you as their father. I know they love you. I just want to be in their lives. I want them to know who I am. Richard looked at her with something that might have been respect. If they're yours, you have every right to them. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. First, we prove it. Tomorrow, first thing in the morning, we do DNA tests. Can you wait until then? Natalie nodded. Claire, you're not fired, but you don't speak a word of this to anyone. Understood? Claire nodded frantically. Richard turned to leave, then stopped. Natalie, I'm sorry for what my wife put you through. If I'd known... You didn't know? No, but I should have questioned things more. I should have paid attention. He looked at the babies one more time. Get some sleep. Tomorrow changes everything. After he left, Natalie stood in that nursery looking at Ethan, Noah, and Emma sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks, her babies, and tomorrow the whole world would know the truth. But what Natalie didn't know yet was that Vivian Blackwood wasn't going down without a fight. And desperate people do desperate things. What would you do if someone tried to steal your children? Tell me in the comments, because this story is about to reach its breaking point. The explosive revelation. Natalie didn't sleep that night. How could she? Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those babies calling her Mama. She saw Richard's face when Vivian confessed. She saw her entire life hanging in the balance. At 6 a.m., there was a knock on her door. It was Richard. He looked like he hadn't slept either. His hair was messy, his eyes red, still wearing the same clothes from last night. Get dressed. We're going to the hospital, now. What about Vivian? Vivian is locked in the guest room with a security guard outside. She's not going anywhere. Richard's jaw was tight. I made some calls last night. To lawyers, to investigators. This situation is much worse than I thought. Natalie's stomach dropped. What do you mean? Get dressed first. We'll talk in the car. 20 minutes later, Natalie was sitting in the back of Richard's Mercedes, the triplets in their car seats between them. Claire had stayed behind at the mansion. Richard was driving himself, no driver. This was too private. I had my lawyers pull the adoption records last night, Richard said, eyes on the road. Or rather, they tried to. There are no legal adoption records for these children, Natalie. Nothing filed with the state of Texas. Nothing in the federal database. Whatever Vivian did, it wasn't a legal adoption. Natalie felt like she might throw up. What does that mean? It means my wife bought 3 babies on the black market. It means those children were never legally adopted. It means that legally, you're still their mother. Your parental rights were never actually terminated because there was no legitimate adoption process. Richard's hands gripped the steering wheel so hard, his knuckles were white. Do you understand what I'm saying? Vivian committed multiple felonies, fraud, human trafficking, essentially, and I've been raising stolen children for 2 years without knowing it. The word stolen hit Natalie like a physical blow. Her babies had been stolen from her. The lawyer you met with, Richard continued, the woman named Catherine who approached you, neither of them exist. The lawyer's office you went to? Fake, set up in a rented space just for those transactions. My investigators found 3 other women who were approached the same way, desperate pregnant women offered money, made to sign papers that weren't worth the paper they were printed on. Oh my God, Natalie's voice was barely a whisper. There are other babies? We don't know yet. The investigation is ongoing, but Vivian didn't do this alone. Someone helped her, someone who specializes in this kind of transaction. They arrived at the hospital, a private medical center where Richard had clearly called in favors. A doctor was waiting for them, discreet, professional. The DNA tests were quick, cheek swabs. That's all it took. Richard, Natalie, and all 3 babies. Results in 4 hours, the doctor said. I'm putting a rush on it. 4 hours. 4 hours to confirm what Natalie already knew in her soul. They went to a private waiting room. Richard paced. The babies played with toys, happy and calm with both Richard and Natalie there. It would have been a sweet scene if the circumstances weren't so devastating. Why did she do it? Natalie asked quietly. If she couldn't have children, why not tell you? Why go through all this? Richard sat down heavily, his head in his hands. My family, my father specifically. The Blackwood legacy is everything to him. Heirs, continuing the family name. When Vivian and I got married, he made it very clear that he expected grandchildren. Richard's voice was bitter. Vivian was terrified of losing me, of losing this life, the money, the status, the mansion. So she lied, she faked a pregnancy, she bought babies to pass off as mine. Did you love her? Richard was quiet for a long time. I thought I did, but now I'm looking back at our entire marriage, and I don't know what was real and what was performance. Emma toddled over to Natalie and climbed into her lap. Started playing with Natalie's hair. The gesture was so natural, so instinctive. This baby knew her mother. Richard watched them. Can I ask you something? Yes. The father, the biological father, is he in the picture? No. He left the second he found out I was pregnant with triplets. I haven't seen or heard from him in over 2 years. I don't even know where he is. Richard nodded. So these children have no legal father either. The implication hung in the air between them. 3.5 hours later, Richard's phone rang. He answered it, listened, said thank you, and hung up. He looked at Natalie, his face unreadable. The results are ready. Do you want to come with me to get them, or do you want me to bring them to you? Natalie stood up, Emma still in her arms. I'll come. They walked down the hallway together, Richard carrying Noah, Natalie carrying Emma, Claire appearing to take Ethan. At the doctor's office they sat down. The doctor handed Richard an envelope. Richard opened it, read it. His face went completely white. He handed the papers to Natalie. The words swam in front of her eyes, but 3 lines stood out, clear as day. Probability of maternity, Natalie Morrison. 99% probability of paternity, Richard Blackwood. 0% conclusion, Natalie Morrison is the biological mother of all 3 children. Richard Blackwood is not the biological father. Natalie's hands started shaking so hard the papers rattled. Tears streamed down her face. "They're mine," she whispered. "They're really mine." Richard was staring at the wall, his face a mask of devastation. "They're not mine. Not biologically. 2 years of being a father, and they're not even mine." The doctor cleared his throat gently. "Biologically, no. But Mr. Blackwood, you've raised these children since birth. You're the only father they've ever known. That counts for something. Does it count legally?" Richard's voice was harsh. "That's a question for lawyers, not doctors." They went back to the mansion in silence. Natalie held all 3 babies in the back seat, unable to let them go now. Richard drove, his face like stone. When they walked through the front door, Vivian was there. She must have convinced the security guard to let her out. She was pacing the foyer, still in last night's clothes, her perfect hair a mess. She froze when she saw them. "Well?" Her voice was defiant, but her eyes were terrified. Richard held up the DNA results. "You lied. About everything. These children aren't mine. They're hers." He pointed at Natalie. "And you bought them illegally. You committed crimes, Vivian. Multiple crimes." Vivian's face crumpled. "Richard, please, I did it for us. For you. Your father would have—" "Don't you dare blame my father for this." Richard's roar made everyone in the room flinch. "You bought human beings. You stole someone's children. You made me fall in love with babies that weren't mine while their real mother was out there grieving. I gave them a good life. Look at this house. Look at everything they have. What could she have given them?" Vivian pointed at Natalie with pure hatred in her eyes. "She sold them. She took the money. She's not innocent in this." "I was manipulated." Natalie's voice came out strong for the first time. "I was lied to. I was told it was a legal adoption. I was told they'd have a better life. I was desperate, and you people preyed on that desperation. You still took the money, and I've regretted it every single day for 2 years. Natalie was crying now, but her voice didn't waver. "Every single day I wondered if my babies were okay, if they were happy, if they were loved. I mourned them. I grieved them like they were dead. And you brought me into this house and tortured me while I took care of my own children without knowing I was allowed to love them." The words echoed in the massive foyer. Richard's phone rang. He looked at it. "It's my lawyer." He answered, listened, his face getting darker and darker. "I understand. Yes. Do it." He hung up. "Vivian Blackwood, my lawyers have contacted the police. You're being charged with fraud, falsification of legal documents, and human trafficking. There are detectives on their way here right now." Vivian's face went grey. "Richard, please, we can fix this. We can make this go away. Your money, your power. My money and power are going to make sure you face every single consequence of what you've done." Richard's voice was ice cold. "You destroyed lives, Vivian, multiple lives. And you were going to let Natalie walk away thinking she'd sold her children legally when the whole thing was a fraud from the beginning. What about you?" Vivian's voice turned vicious. "You're not their father. You have no legal claim to them. You're going to lose them too." The words hit Richard like a slap. He looked at the triplets, still in Natalie's arms, and something broke in his expression. "I know," he said quietly. "I know." Sirens sounded outside, police cars pulling up to the mansion. Vivian started backing away. No, this isn't happening." "Richard, please." But Richard just stepped aside as 2 detectives walked through the front door. "Vivian Blackwood?" one of them asked. Yes, Richard answered for her. Ma'am, you're under arrest for fraud and human trafficking. You have the right to remain silent. Natalie watched as they handcuffed Vivian Blackwood, as they read her rights, as they led her out of her own mansion in front of her staff, her security guards, everyone. Vivian looked back once. This isn't over. I'll fight this. Those are my children. No, Natalie said, her voice clear and strong. They're mine. The door closed. Vivian was gone, and Natalie stood in that mansion, holding her 3 babies, with Richard Blackwood looking at them like his heart was breaking, because the truth was out, justice was being served. But the hardest part was still to come. What happens to the man who raised children that aren't his? What happens to the mother who finally got her babies back? If you're crying right now, I understand. Leave a like if you need to see how this ends. Justice and a new beginning. The mansion felt different after Vivian was arrested. Quieter, emptier, like a spell had been broken. Natalie sat in the nursery, the triplets finally asleep after hours of being held and reassured. She couldn't stop looking at them, her babies. Legally, biologically, undeniably hers, but her heart was breaking for the man sitting downstairs in his office, surrounded by lawyers and paperwork. Richard Blackwood had just lost everything, his wife, his children in a way, his entire life revealed as a lie. There was a soft knock on the nursery door. Margaret, the cook, peeked in. Mr. Blackwood is asking if you'll come downstairs. The lawyers need to talk to you. Natalie's stomach twisted with anxiety. Can you watch them? Of course, honey. Downstairs, Richard's office was filled with serious-looking people in expensive suits. Richard sat behind his desk, looking smaller somehow, despite his size. Defeated. Natalie, sit down, please. He gestured to a chair. One of the lawyers, a woman with sharp eyes and grey hair, spoke first. Miss Morrison, I'm Amanda Chen. I represent Mr. Blackwood, but I want you to understand that you need your own legal representation. What we're discussing today affects your rights and your children's future. I can't afford a lawyer, Natalie said quietly. I'll pay for it, Richard said immediately. It's the least I can do, Amanda continued. The situation is legally complex. The children were obtained through illegal means. The adoption papers Vivian had you sign were fraudulent. Legally, you never gave up your parental rights. You are the sole legal guardian of those 3 children. The words should have filled Natalie with joy. Instead, she felt a weight settle on her shoulders. What about Richard? Mr. Blackwood has no legal claim to the children. He's not the biological father. There was no legal adoption. In the eyes of the law, he's a stranger. Natalie saw Richard flinch at the word stranger. However, Amanda said, pulling out documents, there are options. Mr. Blackwood could apply for adoption of the children with your consent, or you could establish a custody agreement, or I want him to be their father, Natalie interrupted. Everyone looked at her. What? Richard's voice was hoarse. Natalie turned to face him directly. Those babies love you. You've been their father since the day they were born. They know your voice. They smile when they see you. You've changed their diapers, fed them bottles, stayed up all night when they were sick. You're their father in every way that matters except biology. But they're yours, Richard said. I have no right. You have every right because you love them. I saw it in your face when you thought you might lose them. Natalie's voice was steady. I don't want to take them away from you. I want us to figure out how we can both be in their lives. Richard stared at her like she'd just offered him the world. You would share custody? After everything my wife did to you? Your wife, not you. You didn't know. Natalie took a deep breath. Those babies need both of us. They need their mother, but they also need the father who's been loving them for 2 years. I won't take that away from them, or from you. The lawyers started talking about custody agreements, visitation schedules, legal guardianship, but Richard held up his hand, stopping them. I have a different proposal. He looked at Natalie. "Don't answer right away. Just hear me out." Natalie nodded. "This mansion has 15 bedrooms. Most of them are empty. You could move into one of the family suites, not as an employee, as the children's mother. We could co-parent under the same roof. I'd provide everything you need, a salary if you want to call it that, though you wouldn't need to work, health insurance, education fund for the triplets, anything and everything." "Richard, I can't—" "Let me finish, please." Richard leaned forward. "I know this is unconventional. I know we barely know each other. But those children upstairs are the best thing that's ever happened to me, even if they're not biologically mine. And they deserve to have both of us in their lives every single day, not on weekends, not on alternating holidays. Every day." Natalie's mind was reeling. "You're offering me a home here?" "I'm offering you a partnership in raising our children, because that's what they are now. Ours, not mine, not just yours. Ours." The lawyers looked shocked. Amanda spoke up. "Mr. Blackwood, I need to advise you that this arrangement could be—" "I don't care how it looks," Richard said firmly. "I care about those 3 babies upstairs, and I care about making sure their mother is never desperate or struggling again." Natalie felt tears sliding down her face. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Richard's expression softened. "Because you gave birth to 3 miracles. Because you made an impossible choice when you were desperate. Because you've suffered enough. And because, Natalie, you didn't have to offer to share custody with me. You could have taken those babies and walked out of here and never looked back, but you didn't. You thought about what was best for them. That tells me everything I need to know about the kind of mother you are." The next 3 weeks were chaos. Vivian's arrest made headlines. Socialite arrested for illegal baby trafficking. The news crews camped outside the mansion. Richard's lawyers worked overtime to keep Natalie's identity protected and the triplets out of the media. The investigation revealed that Vivian had worked with an underground network that targeted desperate pregnant women across 3 states. 4 other women came forward with similar stories, babies who'd been taken under false pretenses, lives destroyed. Vivian was denied bail. "Flight risk," the judge said. She sat in county jail waiting for trial, facing up to 20 years in prison. Richard filed for divorce immediately, and Natalie moved into the master guest suite on the 2nd floor, right next to the nursery. The first few days were awkward. She wasn't an employee anymore, but she wasn't quite family yet either. The other staff didn't know how to treat her. Margaret was the first to break the ice. "You want to help me make cookies with the babies this afternoon?" she asked one morning. "I'd love that," Natalie said, smiling. Slowly, carefully, a new routine emerged. Mornings, Natalie and Richard would have breakfast together while the triplets ate in their high chairs, making a mess and laughing. Richard would go to work. Natalie would spend the day with the babies, but now as their mother, not their caretaker. In the evenings, Richard would come home and they'd do bath time together, bedtime stories together, like a family. A strange, unconventional, broken and rebuilt family. But a family. One evening, about a month after Vivian's arrest, Richard found Natalie in the nursery. All 3 babies were asleep. She was just sitting there watching them breathe. "You okay?" he asked softly. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and this will all be a dream," Natalie admitted, "that I'll be back sleeping on that bench at the bus station." Richard sat down next to her. "It's not a dream. You're home. They're home." "This doesn't feel like my home. This is your house. Then make it yours too. Change whatever you want, redecorate, tear down walls. I don't care. I want you to feel like you belong here." Natalie looked at him, really looked at him. This man who'd had every reason to hate her, to blame her, to push her away. Instead, he'd given her everything. "Why are you doing all this, Richard, really?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because the night I found out they weren't biologically mine, I thought my world was ending. I thought I'd lost my children. But then you said I could still be their father. You gave me back my life, Natalie. This is me saying thank you. You don't owe me anything. Maybe not. But those 3 babies in there deserve the best of both of us. And I think we make a pretty good team. Natalie smiled. Yeah, we do. 6 months later, the custody agreement was finalized. Joint legal custody. Natalie and Richard Blackwood, co-parents. The adoption paperwork was filed for Richard to officially become their legal father. The triplets were almost 2.5 now, walking, talking in short sentences, laughing all the time, and they called both Natalie and Richard by name now, Mama and Dada. No confusion, just love. Vivian's trial happened that fall. She was found guilty on all counts, sentenced to 15 years in prison. The other women in the trafficking network were arrested too. The fake lawyer, the people who'd set up the fraudulent office. All of them. Justice was served. On the triplets' 2nd birthday, Richard threw a small party. Just family. Margaret baked a cake. Jose decorated the garden. Claire, who'd stayed on as a part-time helper, brought presents. Natalie watched Ethan, Noah and Emma running around the backyard, screaming with joy, chocolate cake on their faces. Her babies, healthy, happy, safe. Richard came to stand next to her. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For loving them. For loving them when you thought they were yours. For still loving them after you found out they weren't. For being the father they need." Richard smiled. "Thank you for being brave enough to give them life, and brave enough to fight to get them back." That evening, after the babies were asleep, Natalie stood in her room, looking out the window at the Dallas skyline. 2 years ago, she'd been at her lowest point, broken, desperate, convinced she'd made the worst mistake of her life. But sometimes the worst moments lead to something better than you could have imagined. She had her children back. She had a home. She had a partner in Richard who respected her and valued her. She had a second chance, and she was never, ever going to waste it. Because the greatest wealth isn't in mansions or money. It's in having the right to love the children you brought into this world. It's in second chances and chosen family. It's in the sound of 3 little voices calling Mama, and knowing you fought through hell to earn that name. Natalie Morrison was finally home, and no amount of money could ever compare to that. If you believe every mother deserves a second chance, leave a like. If you believe that family is more than just biology, share this story. And tell me in the comments what city you're watching from, because every single one of you who made it to the end of this journey understands what really matters in life: love, truth, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her children. The end.